Now, it was 40 years ago today that a squadron of F-16 fighter jets, accompanied with air support, lifted off from Israel to make an unprecedented bombing run of nearly 1,000 miles. The target, Iraq's Osirak nuclear reactor outside Baghdad. And the mission, dubbed Operation Opera, was 100% successful despite considerable risks. Now, at the time, the strike ordered by then Prime Minister Menachem Begin was internationally condemned. Later, it came to be hailed as a decisive blow against Saddam Hussein's plans to obtain nuclear weapons and a precedent-setting marker of the measures Israel was willing to take to eliminate existential threats. Well, joining me in studio, I have the honor to host a Brigadier General in the Reserves, Israel Relic Shafir, a former Israeli Air Force pilot who flew in that raid on Iraq's nuclear reactor, later on to serve as commander of the Tel Nof Air Force Base. Relic, it's great to have you on this anniversary.
Thank you.
I'm going to have to start by asking, when you first heard about the mission, what was your reaction? This is crazy, or this is what a challenge?
Well, it's the first time I heard about this was about a half year prior to the action, and I think all of us were shocked. We were not aware that there was a nuclear plant, and Baghdad seems like beyond the other side of the moon. Nobody's ever been there. The Air Force has never flown that far, It took us by surprise because the F-16 was barely 6 months in the Air Force. It was a new airplane, and so I think we're all surprised. It took a little time to digest what we were going through until we learned about what's in there, the air defenses in the area, the target, etc. And then we trained for about 6 months periodically until the mission itself. It was exciting times.
What was the single hardest challenge of that mission, you think?
Strangely enough, it was the fact that you're alone in an airplane. You're training every couple of weeks. My wingman was Ilan Ramon.
The late Ilan Ramon, who of course died in the shuttle
I was number
explosion.
7, he was number 8. And the fact that you cannot share your feelings, not with your family, you know, tell anyone, not with your friends, because that's the life of fighter pilots. I think that was, it was getting heavy in the sense that you're on your own. You have to deal with whatever feelings you have. And continue.
Almost a relief when you finally could fly off then, maybe.
Yeah, in a way, yes.
Right. Yeah. I want to take you to that moment because you mentioned that you and Ilan Ramon were number 7 and 8 in the squadron, meaning you were the last ones on that bombing run. I've read about it. The reactor was already exploding and you're coming in. I mean, what did you think at the moment? Did you think you could lose your life at that moment when you made that last bombing run?
Before we took off, the analysis was that 2 of the 8 airplanes are going to be shot down. And the further you're back, the more dangerous it is. And Ilan and I thought that we had the best chance of being shot. And so mentally, when you're in there, I mean, there's no turning back at any time. You develop a mentality that you're going on a one-way ticket. I know it sounds stupid, silly, even to me when I think about this, but that was the genuine feeling that it's a one-way ticket. If I get back, it's a bonus. And we're going in there, get the mission done, and then worry about everything else.
Right, and in fact, the squadron commander, Amos Yadlin, went on to be the chief.
He wasn't the squadron commander, he was deputy.
Deputy commander, I'm sorry. Yeah. But later on become the head of military intelligence.
Right.
Did say that whatever could go wrong didn't go wrong. There was an element of luck involved in the operation that served you.
You know, Napoleon said at the time, he doesn't look for generals with wit or great strategic thinking, but with luck. So sometimes you need luck, and in this case, luck was on our side.
Right. Now, let's go back. You come back to Israel. At the time, as I said before, there was international condemnation of how dare Israel take this action. I mean, do you remember that reaction and your feelings? Of course, in Israel, it was hailed as a tremendous, tremendous feat, though there was some internal criticism here at the time, too. We should.
Sure, a little, yes.
A little bit. But do you remember that reaction? How did you feel about that when the world was condemning what you presumably saw, and certainly most of the rest of Israel saw, as an act of tremendous heroism?
Yes, we saw this as part of a game that's being played by part of the international community. But I'll just, to get things in perspective, I'm named after my grandfather, and my daughter is named after my father's sister, who both died in the Holocaust. And I got the name. And the fact that I was able to fly and take that threat off while they were exterminated in Vilnius in Lithuania in 1943, that perspective actually overcame any sight of opposition, which we saw, I think, at the time as paying some dues to some international agreements. But shortly thereafter, I think both Alexander Haig and the president at the time, Ronald Reagan, heralded the mission as important, not to talk about the years later on.
Well, let's talk about a little bit of the years later on when the Gulf War, the first Gulf War, erupted, and it seemed just to change the view of that. Did you feel that in some way justified by that, the U.S. Invading Iraq without having the threat of an atomic weapon being used against them or being used against Israel at the time?
Yes, I think it was kind of a feeling that, yes, now that everybody had seen what Saddam was planning and it's out in the open, it's clear that the justification is clear. But, even going back to 1981 at the time, I think we understood that even though the United States did participate in the condemnation, it was paying dues to the international community rather than anything material, because they understood that a nuclear threat at the hands of an irresponsible leader such as Saddam Hussein is something that no country can tolerate.
Well, let's talk about that, and let's bring it up to date. Of course, it did set a sort of precedent that Israel made good on later on, of course, bombing the nuclear reactor that was being built by the Assad regime in Syria. And now we have a debate or a discussion about whether Israel might again have to take a similar action against the Iran nuclear reactor. How viable is the model with variation of the Osirik rate of Operation Opera to dealing potentially with the Iran nuclear threat?
I think the Iranians have learned a lesson and have changed. Their program is putting their different systems of the nuclear program in bunkers that are very difficult to penetrate.
Underground, deep underground.
Deep underground in many, many sites. And thus, it's the same type of operation is, a surprise hit, 50 seconds from low level to low level, take it off and write it off is not possible. And so a different mode of operation would need to take place. We're not there yet. We're not. They're not close as yet to a position where extreme measures need to be taken.
As far as we know, we should say.
Yeah, I think we know pretty well. There are things you can't hide. And I think that it would take the international community, which is aware of what Iran is trying to do, and perhaps a military operation, if would have to take place, would need the U.S. Air Force to fly over for quite a long time. I mean, many days, and to dig holes, bunker busters, in order to take it off the map. So it's not a one-time operation like the one we did 40 years ago.
Right, but do you feel, even though that kind of operation you may not be able to replicate with Iran, it did set as I said before, a sort of marker that no one should ever underestimate what Israel will do to take out an existential threat? Briefly.
Yes, that is true, and there are many ways to skin a cat. And a direct attack like the one we did 40 years ago is one of them, but certainly not the only one.
Right. Well, certainly with the new technologies that are being developed, new missile technology, it may be that even that kind of operation may, where pilots are taking the lead, who knows, in the future that may not be the case, but you certainly took part in a history-making event there, not just for Israel, but I dare say globally. Israel Relic Shafir, thank you for joining us on this anniversary of